Welcome. Welcome to another episode of The Impact of AI, sponsored by AI Time Journal. Each week, we explore how AI and cognitive technologies impact us daily, both professionally and personally. For those of you whom I've not met yet, my name is Melissa Drew, and I will be your host for this week's podcast. We're extremely fortunate today to have Aruna Patam. Not only has she 21 years of high impact solutions with data analytics, artificial intelligence, machine learning analytics platforms, but she also marries that with her background in fraud protection, anti-money laundering, credit risk, and data protection. She is currently the head of AI and data science practice at HCL Technologies for Asia Pacific and the Middle East region. And what's most notable about you today is that you are doing this interview while you were at home in Sydney, Australia. Is that right?
Yeah, that's right. That's right.
Oh my gosh, this is great. So how are you?
Yeah, I'm fine. I'm good. Thank you. So I think one thing with all this pandemic, we've become global. I'm interacting in Europe and America and probably less Australia looks like it, but I'm quite excited. Yeah. Thanks for having me here. I'm
glad we could find a time to make this work because for those of you who aren't familiar with the time zone, I'm sitting here at 6 o'clock in the evening on a Thursday night, and she's dialing in at 9 o'clock in the morning on Friday morning. So,
yes.
So thank you.
Yes.
The first question we always ask everyone is the same. It talks about your journey. Early on, when I look at your journey, you started out in analytics, and not a lot of people start in analytics actually end up in analytics. So I'd be interested to understand how you got into, what was really the interest with analytics, and then maybe a little bit more about how you got from where you were 20 years ago until you got to here today.
Thanks, Melissa. First, thanks for the opportunity for me to speak. I'm really excited. I've seen all your episodes. You've got a good lineup of speakers and good topics and on AI. It's quite insightful. Thanks and hello to your audience. In terms of my career journey, I started. I came to Australia in '97 as a student doing post-graduation in computer science. And prior to that, I had MBA. I finished my MBA back in India. And then, I was thinking, what should I do? And computer science at that time sort of was picking up. I'm talking about 97, that timeline. So I came here, I said, you're going to a new country, it's better off to be technical, so at least you get a job. So that's sort of the motivation for me to get into the computer science. So I did that, and I was lucky enough to get a graduate recruitment into SAS, which was a very highly analytical company. So that led me the foundation. So that is one company that will stay with my heart until I finish my journey, because that's where we had a very good graduate recruitment program, 6 months of intensive training on all the analytical solutions, and we were deployed in many different projects. So that's where I sort of got to know the ins and outs of the analytics. And my journey has been, I'm quite lucky in a way, because I actually was able to, doing my various work experience, has a round off of all the dimensions that you need in an AI. So to explain that, first I started off in the data side, heavy data management side. What is the data that is required to actually feed into the models, analytical solutions? So that's where my focus has been, delivered many solutions, gradually shifted into building the models and implementing the models into production. And then moved from a technical role into technical management roles. I was responsible for looking after, the end-to-end life cycle of the model build, starting from getting the data, building the models, and then implementing, operationalizing, and making sure it is running effectively. So that's where I got, the complete view of, what are the various components that's required in building the analytic solutions. On top of it, and then from there, from being more of a implementer, then moved into the more of a execution into a strategic role. So I've been doing data analytics strategy, and the most interesting thing, I also held roles in data governance, which is it's getting all coming to nicely into a picture, because I got to know about the importance of data owners, data stewards, data quality, data lineage, metadata management, all of these components governance, which are so crucial for the success of AI. AI is heavily AI driven. So I think that's now after all of that, now I'm in AI and data science. I'm trying to, apply those techniques into business and drive value. So I think that's where I'm very lucky to have that 360-degree view of AI, able to appreciate not only technology, but also the people side of it, the process side of it, and the ground. And so that's been sort of my career journey throughout. And sort of, I have a different aspects of AI that needs to be, it's important for it to get AI implementation done.
Now, HCL Technologies, that's more of a consulting firm, correct?
Yes.
Okay. So in your role, you have a unique perspective of working with a lot of companies.
Yes.
Right? Okay. So what exactly is your role today, and what are you doing in bringing value to your clients?
Yeah, so I'm currently the head of AI and data science. I look after the Asia Pacific and Middle East region, and my role is two things. One is establishing the capability, so getting the team, setting up the practice, setting up the team, getting the right resources. That's one aspect of the thing.
Mm-hmm.
The other one is understanding the client's requirements. From starting from how do I get into AI, how do I adopt AI, what are the things helping them in that journey, to actually looking at their problems and challenges and any opportunities that where AI can be used to drive value, help them provide more personalized services to the customers, or have that competitive cutting edge compared to the others. So that's pretty much where, and I'm very fortunate again, prior to joining this organization, I was more into financial services. I worked for two of the big four banks in Australia.
Mm-hmm.
Pretty much 15, 16 years I spent in the financial services industry. So I'm sort of well-rounded in the financial space, but now it opens me up to other industry, financial services, utilities, you name it. So AI has got sort of potential everywhere. And this job gives me that opportunity to experiment and learn how AI could be used in every other industry. And I keep saying that it's a crash course for me, because while you're in banking, you are working on one thing, deep dive, whereas when you come to a consulting, you see different clients, different problems in different angles. So you're able to constantly challenge yourself and find innovative solutions. That's what keeps me exciting in this role.
So I think you have a very unique perspective in that a lot of the folks that I've been talking to recently are here in the US, have a very US kind of centric perspective. But we're fortunate to have you because you're sitting on the other half of the world, over in Australia, specifically in Asia Pacific. So I think what I would really like to drill into is the companies that you're working with. Are you finding that they're all still in those early stages of AI?
It depends. It depends on the domain, sector.
Mm-hmm.
If you look at the financial services sector, you would have a little bit more maturity in that because AI is probably heavily used in the financial services. Even before the AI term coined, right? We had this analytics algorithms and stuff. They are all heavily in, especially in Australia, banking. So
Mm-hmm.
industry is pretty big, and they've got the technology, they've got the money, power to throw into the technology. So it's fairly matured in the financial services sector. But others, they are in the different. So telecom is the next one. They're fairly upcoming, if fairly close to financial sector. Others are, various levels of maturity. You would see, government, surprisingly, I'm finding they are getting more and more into motivated to have AI services in their government services they provide. So it's like different level of maturities in different sectors, where financial services and telecom seems to be the leaders, but there are other industries also trying to deploy.
So with your unique perspective, as you work with companies, what do you think some of the challenges are in those early stages as companies are just starting to, I know I need to adopt it, I know I need to embrace it. What are you seeing as some challenges that are in that early stages?
Yeah, so the one of the first is itself is trying to get into AI. So there is
Mhm.
this always there is a fear of, right? There is a perception that AI is can be quite complex, very expensive and time consuming, and it takes a lot of time and money to get the return on value.
Mhm.
That's the sort of a perception some companies, organizations have, and that we see. I think we need to have that's what we coach them. We need to have a bit of a structured approach. The first thing you do is, look at the strategy. First thing you want to have is the AI strategy in place, which is tied to your business strategy, like your business priorities, and so on and so forth. So that's the first things you need to know. Where you are in the journey of AI. We need to, once you have the AI strategy, then you need to know how do I go about implementing. Before even you start anything, first is do a maturity assessment. Find out where because as I said, for AI there are different dimensions of AI that needs to be in place. You need to have the people, you need to have the data, the processes, the technologies, the governance aspect of it, ethics aspect of it. So you need to make sure they are the foundations for adopting AI. Do you have all of them in place? Where your organization is sitting in terms of those dimensions? So there are a lot of maturity assessment guidelines and frameworks that's available that the organizations can use, where you evaluate your dimensions against those and say, and that tells you where you are, what's your current state, and where you want to be in terms of the, what's your 3-year and 5-year roadmap for the AI. And then that easily gives you the gap. You come up in a pretty stock standard strategy roadmap that we do, come up with a gap analysis. And that's where you start coming up with small use cases. I will say always start with small. Look at a specific business problem. You need to tie it to a business problem that you're trying to address and which has got driving value to the organization. That's where you're going to get the funding and everything that is required from the top management. So look at a very small problem. Don't go for big things. Very small problem that is easily achievable either by going in buying off the shelf products. There are a lot of off the shelf products available, which can just solve that small problem that you have. Build the confidence that you are able to solve the problem fairly quickly. You can show the return on investment to the management. Then slowly you can start implementing other use cases, other problems. So that's where I started. You need to have a little bit of a top-down approach, have a holistic, have the management buy-in, and then take a journey.
Let me give you a scenario. So in this scenario, I'm an organization. Look, I'm in early stages. I want to do this. I know I need to do it because it's the right thing to do. I need to stay competitive, etc. What are some of the barriers? Like if I start to look at my strategy and trying to develop my maturity assessment, is there something that's going to be a blocker? For example, are there things that I'm already doing in my organization that maybe would be hindering me from that early start?
So the one main thing I think is the culture,
Culture.
change management. So that's a huge barrier where people are so used to doing in a certain way. And you're talking about AI, which is I compare to sort of how electricity 100 years ago, where it sort of transformed everything, right? So that's the potential, but you need to have a different mindset from top management. You need to make sure the barriers comes because of the lack of knowledge and awareness. And that's what I say. In fact, in some of the speeches I've given, I said, AI for everyone. Everyone should have a knowledge. It's not the technology people. Everybody uses technical team, produces these models, but it's the business team who needs to use that models and get out, value out of those solutions, right? So everybody should have a basic understanding what is AI, why we need AI, what are the problems that's going to solve. So, and then you need to have the education and awareness, starting from even top management should know what is it. That's when they try to put that emphasis top down. That's one thing. And the barriers, hopefully you will get rid of that while we have more and more education innovation programs. And there is a whole topic around AI talent gap that we need to look at, and and look at the holistically how we solve the. But if I have to take in a summary, it's the culture, it's the change management or aspect of it that often becomes a barrier.
So as the company moves from the early stages, they've worked through the culture, they've come through the change management, everybody's now adopted this mindset. As we move this AI journey forward in the organization, how do we get to the next stage? What are some of the barriers that I should be looking for as a company?
Yes, that's a good question, Melissa, because that's probably, I see some of the challenges. They're all excited in the journey and start coming up with use cases. I'm going to solve the world's problem. And they've got this within the experimental world, you test and train the models all working. But when it comes to operationalizing these models, that's when it becomes a major challenge. I'm just thinking about going back years in when I started with SaaS. Those days when we did still build models. Those days, we use them in prediction, predictive analytics, and those days organization used to go for the proprietary solutions, where you have companies like SaaS, SPSS, and FICO would have this end-to-end solution which would help you to build the models, implement the models into production and maintenance, all of that operationalization aspects. It's all built, the best practices, the frameworks and tools and everything was available. You need to buy them. And then gradually, as a part of the evolution of the machine learning, with the big data technologies, a lot of data becoming available, and open source software solutions such as R and Python, the software practitioners started moving into using those tools. And as R introduced more and more libraries that they can use, they've started using them, and then started building, and slowly companies started building models using that, because they are open source, you can just use as you wish. But what they realize is, after that, once we have all the models sort of working, we don't have the tools and processes in place to actually implement them into production. Interestingly, in 2015, I think there was a paper produced by Google around the hidden technical debt for machine learning systems. So that's where this sort of awareness on how there is a big thing that is required to address, which is how do I operationalize the models into production, so they can be used in day-to-day decision making. And that's what led to the evolution of ML ops, which is an emerging and a most important field at the moment, that a lot of organizations are keen to get on it. And I can see a lot of interest in the last 2-3 years into this ML ops framework. A little bit on, so you have a question for me, Melissa?
Yeah, I was, thank you. I was curious to understand, what's the difference between I've built my model for the prototype or the concept, and now I need to, I think are you saying that my model has to be different when I want to scale it?
No, you don't. Model doesn't have to be different, but you have to put the model into production. So when you actually move the model from a sort of a development phase into production, there are various other aspects that come into the picture. Testing lab, things are all perfect. Everything is according to the conditions, so you can work on it. But once it's go to the real world production, there are various other factors that you need to take into account, which you probably wouldn't have thought of in the lab space. So that's what we are trying to do, address as part of this implementation into production.
So what would be some of the differences then? Like you just made a reference that there might be some things as you shifted into production, that these real world examples that we may have not thought about. What were some of the examples that you've bumped into?
Yeah, so that's a good question, leading into why this MLOps discipline sort of came into, right? So MLOps, it was produced because it's nothing but a set of practices, processes, and tools and techniques that need to work together to actually deploy the models, monitor the models, and ongoing maintenance of the models, total ongoing management of the models in production. And you do it in such a way that you are able to scale, you are still able to have governance of the models in place, and it is still driving business value, right? That was the reason we brought in. It is actually a fusion of 3 different disciplines: the data engineering discipline, which sort of works on the data side of the pipelines. You have the model machine learning, which builds the models, and the third one, which is most important, is the DevOps. How do you operationalize those models into production? And coming back to your question, you asked about, okay, what are some of the challenges or issues that you have when you move the models into production, right? So some of the things, first is mitigate there are some risks when you move the models into production, and ML ops is actually helps you mitigate that risk. The risks I see is, you send the model, put the model into production. Sometimes the model may not be available to run, the model may not be running for some reason, right? Or the model is not predicting the way it sort of predicted when it was in the development phase, or the accuracy of the model started deteriorating, or the fairness of the model started deteriorating. These are some of the issues as time goes by. These are the things that can influence the models. So you need to constantly monitor the model, so that is it producing the same output that is meant to produce? Is the new data that is coming into them, feeding into the models, is actually skewing up the models, and it's actually digressing from what it was meant to do, right? So you need to constantly monitor and provide that feedback into the development, so that they machine learning is all about constantly learning from failures or new things that comes into, right? That's where you need to have this sort of well-oiled operationalized engine, which sort of runs constantly, monitor, yes, am I predicting the way I'm going to predict? Is my model accuracy is staying the way it meant to be? And then you send the feedback back, and you refine the models, and then put it back into production. So you need to have that, somebody having that process and techniques in place. So if there is any issues with the model, it generates alerts. There is someone who's looking at the alerts, and there is a data scientist who actually looks at, okay, why did the accuracy fail, or what happened, why this model did not work? And you need to have that sort of bells and whistles in place, so that it's continuously producing the outcome it's meant to produce. So that's one of the the MLOps addresses. It's around mitigating the risks in the models. Other thing is scaling the models, right? So as I've seen, as more and more complex algorithms are coming into place, and business have started realizing the value of using these models in their outcome, we are actually moving from building tens of models to hundreds and thousands of models. But if even though the numbers have increased, each model has to perform the way it has to be. Each model, as I was explaining, has to go through this phase. Am I doing the way I'm building, and has my accuracy gone down? So and then it has to be monitored, it has to be recorded, and made sure that, because it's got a huge implication. If something goes wrong, it's got a huge implication. You need to have, that's where I also bring in the responsible AI. The MLOps has got this full framework of responsible AI, which is like a governance model. They got two aspects to this. One is, from a data perspective, am I using the right data? Am I allowed to use the data? Is it PI? All of these things that you would need to think about when you're building models, they are the frameworks that gets questioned. That is around. And then what about the explanatory ability? Am I able to understand what the outcomes of the model? Not only the person who is building the models, but somebody out there who is actually making those decisions should know why the machine actually predicted the way it predicted, right? So those are all the aspects that these frameworks sort of explain you and help you. The other aspect is full accountability. Like once you're going into this high scale, enterprise scale machine learning models, who is accountable for the recommendations that comes out of this model? Who makes sure that the models are running okay? And if who makes sure that only right people have access to those models, right people are making changes to the models? What about the audit logging and all of these other things that you would need in an operationalization of world? That's where you get this ML ops giving that end-to-end framework, which looks at mitigating the risks that the model might have, looking at scaling. When do you scale models? There are other challenges that you need to make sure shares numbers. How do you manage them, monitor them? And also responsible AI. How do I build a ethical and a trusted AI? So that's where, companies have started exploring this MLOps framework, everyone who wants to do large scale implementation.
I think you've been able to really articulate and dive deeper into why everyone is still stuck in the concept phase. Like I've talked to a lot of folks, and everybody seems to be able to get in the journey from I want to do it, let's go do it, let's get a team to start it, I build a proof of concept, and then we just kind of get stuck there. And I think you've really highlighted all the avenues that have to be thought through, and there's a lot there to scale. I don't think I fully recognized how much effort there was and all the little moving parts just to take this concept into something that needs to be scaled in production.
Yeah, exactly. So there's a whole lot of, we call them model lives. You should first establish your business objectives. Why I am wanting to build a model, have you thought through that properly? Then what is the data that I need? Have I thought through the data? Is it the right data? Can I use it? All of that. Then you build the models. Is a model, am I building the model with no bias in it? All of that stuff need to be taken into. And then, do I have my production environment ready? Is it have the power? Does it have the data? Can I access to the data in production as I used to have it in development? And then you deploy the models into production. Then you constantly monitor the models and provide feedback back into the development team so they can refine the models. And it's like a factory, and you need to keep sure it works continuously, and there is this enterprise, some god out there making sure everything is runs as per it was meant to run. Yeah.
So that's a lot of work. I actually can understand now why people reach out to consultants to kind of help them understand the from the initial concept to the prototype to now scaling.
Yeah.
As we look at coming towards the end of our time today, I want to, because like I said, you're coming at this from not only your perspective of Asia Pacific, but you also your perspective as a consultant and your in-depth background of really focusing on analytics and artificial and cognitive technologies, throughout your career. What's some advice that you could give, someone else who's listening to this and saying, yeah, I think I'm ready. Like, what should I be doing, Aruna?
Yeah, that's a really good question. Because as you see, it's not a technology, it's for everyone, right? And you need people from every expertise to come into this field, domain expertise, model expertise, operational expertise, everyone has got a role to play. And what I would say is, first you need to, anybody who's freshers who wants to sort of other disciplines or graduates who want to move into this field, first you need to learn mathematics, learn Python. That's a basic foundation. I know
I'm not good at math.
Yeah, but as I said, it depends on which field you go in, right? So if you're going into more of the I'm excited in building the models and that sort of a thing, you need to have that foundation. But for others also, not going deep dive, having a bit of a foundation and appreciation. Even I've been in the management roles. I've always wanted to make sure that I know the foundation, so I speak the same language and understand how the whole thing works. So you need to have that knowledge. The second thing is domain expertise. Like, you have to figure out which domain you want to be part of, or is it a financial services domain? Then go understand a little bit about that domain. How do they operate? What are the various challenges they would have? Then you look at, okay, how do I then use AI to actually solve some of these challenges? If I take financial services, there is claims processing, mortgage processing, fraud detection, anti-money laundering, right? There is various dimensions, customer service. You need to understand what are the various pain points or the challenges that this particular domain will have that deep dive understanding. If you're coming from a domain expertise, you already have that knowledge. And then you might need to want to understand a bit more on AI technologies that you can use over there. And the reverse, if you're coming from a very AI machine learning expertise, you need to have that understanding of the domain to be able to appreciate which models can sort of be used for which. As I said, AI cannot solve all problems. It's not for every problem, right? You have to make
Right.
sure you have the right problem to solve with the right AI solution. So you need to have that fundamental foundational knowledge, then the domain expertise. And the other thing, which probably not many people, including myself, previously, is you need to build your own brand. It's good that you know about all of this. Unless you build your brand, you build your network, you be part of this community where you share your knowledge and learn from those. That is very, very important these days. It is no it's yeah, you got all of this knowledge and expertise. If you don't tell people, they don't know about it. So if you really wanted to be successful, first, to get into it, you need to have this sound foundational knowledge, domain expertise and everything. But if you want to sustain and be there for a long term, then you need to do other things, which is so easy these days. I'm talking to you globally from down under,
Yeah.
and LinkedIn and other social media, it keeps us together. And there are a lot of AI communities that's encouraging. And one thing I wanted to, I must cover this, is the diversity and women's role in AI.
Yes.
That needs to be emphasized. And everywhere, wherever I get an opportunity, I emphasize that, because we women are 50% of the population, but we are only 22% when it comes to data and AI workforce. So we need to also, as an industry, have more diversity, have more women representation and other minority represented groups as well. So I've seen a lot of communities, inclusive communities. I'm part of many of those. I'm part of the women's group, trying to encourage more women to come into AI, because only if you have everyone coming into and playing a part, that AI will be successful.
No, I think I would probably just add one more thing to that, and it's okay to ask questions. Ask questions. I've bumped into a lot of folks where I know they're interested and they're just a little bit timid about asking the question. And we all have to recognize that cognitive technologies are so fluid and everything's changing. You just mentioned earlier that we didn't have a concept of ML ops until 2 years ago. So I mean, if we're not asking questions, and us, in the industry, we need to also make sure that we're helpful in addressing those questions. So
Yeah.
absolutely, yeah.
Yeah, I'm asking questions. Be comfortable if you don't know the answers. Like I go do speeches, and I need to be comfortable, because it's such an evolving field. What you see now, in 2 months' time, there's completely new thing. There is tiny AML, there are auto AML, there's few terminologies just get thrown at you, and you got to constantly keep up to it, and you can't be an expert on anything. Be comfortable to ask questions. Be comfortable that you don't know the answers to those questions as well.
So I've got a saying. That says, be comfortable with being uncomfortable.
Yes.
So you have to accept that, and it goes back to what you're saying. You have to accept that you're going to be uncomfortable in this area, but that's okay, because chances are everybody else is too, because this thing is so fluid and so evolving.
Yeah, true, really.
Oh my gosh, this is great. I know we're going to catch up again in about a year from now. Maybe we'll be a little bit closer. I don't know. Maybe I'll come to Australia. I'd love to do that. That would be great. Maybe you could come to New York or to Maryland, but we're definitely going to catch back up and see what you're doing in about a year from now.
Exactly. I'm looking forward.
All right. Thank you so much again for your time.